When a tenant has to break a lease, that's a really shocking situation for most landlords because they had the expectation that they were going to have this tenant in place and the rent coming in, and often they're just confused about what to do. And luckily, we've been through this a lot, so we're really good at advising. Probably the guiding principle I would have in this is empathetic education. The same as when a tenant doesn't pay rent, right? We want to have empathy toward whatever situation is diverting their plans, because remember, they also thought that they were going to be in this housing for that period of time. And so their plans have changed. We're going to be empathetic to that. We're going to understand what's going on. But really, our role in this is to lead them through the resolution. We need to be the leader, and we need to educate them and inform them as to the lease. What does the lease say is going to happen? Because this helps them make better decisions. When they understand their responsibilities under this, that's going to be for the best. People ask me, what do you put in your lease regarding breaking it? Well, I use what I've always used, and that would be a 1 month's rent early termination fee. So whatever the rent amount is, that's the amount that it would cost for them just to break it. And then they're responsible to pay the rent until the end of the lease or until the property is re-rented, whichever is sooner. And we don't put the property back on the market until that early termination fee is paid. And I really like that scenario because what it does is it holds the tenant accountable for the commitment that they made, and it compensates the landlord for the additional cost of having to re-rent it. That 1 month early termination fee lines up really well with approximately the cost to re-rent the property. That is probably the best way I've seen to handle it. Some people do just forfeiting security deposit and things like this. It's really up to you. You just have to be consistent. So what this could look like is when the tenant calls you, they have a January to December lease, and on June 1st, they call and say, I'm so sorry, Mr. Landlord, I'm gonna have to move out of this property July 1st, thereby not serving the last 6 months of my lease. That is the time when you would go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. That does sound like a change of plans. Let's go back to the lease and revisit the early termination section and how this goes, and let them know exactly what they need to do to be compliant with that. And then my favorite part is to help educate them with some tips on how to make this less of a financial consequence. And mine is always, I think you should cooperate with helping me find a new tenant for this home. And that would mean allow me, of course, to do tours, make the place look and smell great. So hopefully I can do my best to find and attract that tenant to close that gap, or that balance of lease is going to be as little as possible. We don't want the tenant to be burdened with financial obligations as they move out. That's not good for either of us. Lastly, when you're going through something like this with the tenant, it makes the commitment to keeping things in writing really all the more important. I'm all about keeping things in writing. So potentially when a tenant would call me and maybe have that conversation I showed you, oh, I need to terminate early. I'm gonna have that conversation just like a normal person might, and I'm gonna follow it up with an email or a letter. Hey, tenant, thank you for informing me. From what I understand, this is what's gonna happen. This is what I advise, and here's next steps. Now, having it in writing is certainly a great, CYA. We always want a CYA, but I think the issue of keeping it in writing becomes more important when it shows your intent and it shows how accountable you're asking them to be and you're willing to be. It comes across a little different when you have a conversation with somebody and then you get something in writing later saying, hey, just documenting our conversation. It proves to you, hey, they really mean this. And by the way, it gives them a written document to refer to when they want to go, hey, what did they say? What is next? Hey, how is this calculated? I really love the commitment to keeping it in writing, and I don't think text message always counts. Breaking the lease is never going to be fun or easy, but it doesn't have to be dramatic. Keep it in writing, be empathetic, educate to the lease, and always do not let the first time you think about this be when the phone rings with that news.